I want to start off this video by saying that I absolutely love Dune Awakening. I've clocked a lot of hours. As you can see on the screen here, I was part of a closed beta test that I was invited to in April of 2024, which is actually a client that was before this one even, where they switched to a completely different client that I clocked 330 hours in. Then the beta test weekend of 15 hours, plus the launch of 161 since the 5th of June. With all of that mixed in, I've probably got somewhere around 800 hours at this point. I'm coming up on 1,000 hours. So I've spent a lot of time playing the game. I absolutely love Dune. I love what it stands for. I really like the devs. I like their art direction. I like the ideas that they've got. I like where the game is going, but it has issues, just like any other live service game has issues. I have a handful of bulleted points here, and given my, I guess, point of reference for my level of experience and the stuff that I have seen and worked on and worked through throughout my different stages of development of this game as a tester, these are the things that I think the game has a major issue with and things that it needs to improve, some of which already has been addressed, but more on that in a minute. From a PvP purist standpoint, griefing is just part of the game, quote unquote, but players were sold on the idea of PvP always being optional and not required. It's even written on their Steam page as a bulleted point. Late game Deep Desert is required to build endgame items. If you want the fastest ornithopter's engine and wings, body panels, whatever, the best armor, the best weapons, all of those require tier 6 materials that are only found in the Deep Desert. But the entirety of those mats can only be found in a PvP only area. This stops progression for PvE-centric players and negates the PvP is optional, quote, part of that statement. It seems originally the devs intended on the Landsrad tasks and the player market to be things that PvE players would lean heavily into in order to participate in endgame activities. But that didn't track the way the devs intended, and PvE players haven't been happy with the vision of the endgame for them. This is being addressed somewhat from a dev blog written today, where the creative director stated that there would be PvE-only zones added to the Deep Desert in an effort to provide endgame material access, but not the best possible loot and resource hotspots that would still require a PvP flag. Whether or not this alleviates the problem or satisfies everyone, I think that's going to be impossible. They've tried to create a game where they've tried to bridge this idea between something that is PvE-centric and something that is PvP-centric, and allow both sides to, I guess, thrive at the same time. And I'm not sure if you can actually pull that off, but they're trying, and I'll give them that. For the inventory system, you can't label boxes and you can't make signs. For all of the things that Dune feels like it's done incredibly well, how this piece got overlooked as badly as it has is beyond me. Also, the user interface, especially pertaining to permissions and the permissions system in the game, is rough. There's no copy-paste. If I have a vehicle where I've got all of my permissions set up exactly the way that I want, I can't just copy that profile and paste it onto another vehicle. The game won't let me do that. I have to do it by hand, each one at a time. This seems like a massive oversight on the part of the developers that still has yet to be remedied, but has been addressed somewhat to where the developers have recognized this as an issue and have stated that it would be something added to the game in the near future. The combat in Dune. In every part of combat that comes before the Dune Awakening endgame, the combat is all primarily surrounding your abilities and handheld weapons. Everything is more or less done on foot. You can spend 80 to 100 hours refining your weapon selection, talent choices, rebuilding your talent selections over and over again, and build makeup stuff, meticulously crafting your build to enable you to stand toe-to-toe in both PvP and PvE enemies. Gathering, hunting, fighting, all of that stuff is stuff that you can refine over and over and over again. But then you get to the Deep Desert and none of that matters. None of it. Well, not nearly as much anyway. 99% of the game, for the most part of the Deep Desert, is spent flying. You end up flying an ornithopter. Realistically, like 90% of the time, either with an inventory module on it or with a rocket pod, either attacking other players or putting stuff into storage, and then flying it back to your base to be refined or used in crafting. There's even a rocket module for the buggy that was teased in the game launch trailer. That was something that I hadn't even seen yet. That was new for me. I was like hyped, thinking that there was something that they were going to use that with. But to date, I've never made one. There's no point in having it. I don't think any of my friends or live viewers on Twitch have ever made one either, and it doesn't appear to have any place in the late game of Dune at all. There's something to be said for the Ancient Way rocket launcher and a good las gun, but the opportunities to use these are sparse. Imagine if you had a rocket launcher that had a target lock similar to how the Ancient Way works on the back of a buggy, fired a dual rocket salvo that hit for 500 damage each rocket, 1,000 damage on the back of a buggy. Give that buggy significantly reduced worm threat in the deep desert, and now you have a mobile SAM launching buggy capable of doing some real base defense with a real purpose. There should be more to the game than just flying around rocket barraging ornithopters and the occasional opportunity to be able to fight some ornies from the ground with lock-on target rockets every once in a great while. There needs to be more than that. Then we get to the assault ornithopter, and they are just, at the moment, kind of garbage. They have really poor mobility. They turn slower, climb slower, dive slower than scouts, and even with a booster, they just can't stay mobile as well as a scout can. And while their rocket pods do more damage, getting them on target and trying to keep them on target is so incredibly difficult given how heavy and drifty they are. In almost every circumstance, scouts just make a significantly better option for dogfighting. I would love to see the last utility slot on an assault Orni to be used for like a gunner's seat that would allow the Orni to be flown like a Super Cobra helicopter, where the Cobra pilot can engage players or NPCs using a heavy dart cannon from a gun placement on the belly of the Orni. Give somebody doing a ride-along something to do other than sit in the seat of the club car and, I don't know, fiddle with the radio. Dune has major problems with hit registration, though, especially with rockets from things like the Ancient Way. I know I keep mentioning this, but it's like the one big endgame item next to a las gun that we really have that really sees any purpose. This is made worse depending on player ping to the server, to where your positional information between yourself and your target and even an onlooking third party all seem to be off by a bit. This may also have something to do with the server meshing tech they're utilizing, but I am not a network engineer, so I am really just taking shots in the dark here. What I can tell you, though, and what I've seen, is that rockets all too often appear to be impacting a vehicle, and rather than that vehicle taking any visible damage, it seems like the vehicle is just shrugging those rockets off. This is most exacerbated by the Ancient Way rocket launcher because of the homing nature of it, especially when they are moving laterally, and the only time I've seen the Ancient Way actually do any marked amount of damage is if the ornithopter is sitting still. An example of this is a bombardment I recently took in my ornithopter from a 3v1 encounter. I knew I was done, so when I landed my Orni, I took a huge missile barrage as I was trying to pocket the scout. Later, when I got back at base, I took the scout back out and noticed it had almost zero damage done to it, even though I personally saw 7 or 8 rockets just blasting the side of this thing. You also see the netcode problems when fighting on foot using skills like knee charge, Shigawire claw, and weirding step. They miss constantly, even though in some cases you will see false hit indicators on your UI, like this one, where I do a knee charge and it shows that I actually hit the guy. There's a little X pops up on the screen, but he doesn't take any damage and he just kind of walks backward. In fact, the ground-based PvP is full of visual bugs where players are constantly blinking past other players only to be rubber banded back, bad hit registration even on cliff sides when you're trying to escape using something like the Shigawire claw, and many, many other examples. For building stuff, when a base is being raided, there's no lockout timer on being able to build. So if you're defending and someone starts knocking your walls down, you can just run around behind them and just build walls up behind them when they enter the base. If you can stay on top of the building, you can just keep them walled in until the shields come back up, and then they can't get out unless they suicide. Or I guess they could technically keep fighting you until another storm came by hours later, but the likelihood of somebody just getting bored and saying the hell with it and deciding to respawn is pretty high. Pretty high. All of this is to say that Dune, for the most part, kind of lacks endgame content. It doesn't really have a big enough carrot. If we're talking about on-foot PvP stuff or on-foot stuff to do as part of the endgame, the idea of having to run labs or endgame dungeons of some kind that have like some uber boss with really cool stuff that you can loot, unique blueprints and whatnot, none of that really exists. There are labs to run, but the labs just have waves of enemies that ultimately culminate with a chest at the back end of it, and if you're in the deep desert in a PvP zoned area, that chest is only there once every hour and a half or so. Add to this the issue where somebody that gets to that room could simply log out. If they're able to loot the chest, they could log out, set an alarm for an hour and a half later, log back in, still be in that same room when they re-arrive back on the server, loot the chest again, and then hide in a corner and log back out, assuming that somebody doesn't show up in the next 5 minutes. That person could loot that box perpetually for literal days, just showing up every hour and a half or so to loot the chest and then log back out and, I don't know, go watch Netflix or something. In my mind, I feel like they should be giving us some kind of like major endgame dungeon. Give us a dungeon, an underground area that is multi-staged, something that maybe even ends up procedural when the deep desert spawns, that is like this large underground Uber lab of some kind that ends up being 4 or 5 or 6 or hell 10 times larger than a standard lab in size that has to be worked through over a very long period of time, where there is some kind of like amazing stuff at the back end of it, but that you could end up running into just constant waves of on-foot PvP. The thing that immediately comes to mind here is the Pyro system in Star Citizen and the Ruin space station. There's an entire wing of the Ruin space station that is overrun by very high-end endgame PvE NPCs that are very difficult to kill, but are also, because it's a giant PvP area, are also very highly contested. There's guys in there all the time trying to get through to the end to kill the boss, because the boss of that place drops a very, very nice, very desired endgame armor set that is worth millions and millions and millions of credits, because people that don't want to do the PvP stuff still want the cool armor, so they go do other things. And the thing with Dune that lacks is that Dune doesn't have all of those other things to keep people engaged, for them to be able to build themselves up in different ways, where they can then trade away for the stuff that the PvPers are obtaining, that they would sell off in trade, so that everybody kind of has a way to get up and ahead. That is ultimately what Dune Awakening lacks. If you want to give PvE-centric players a carrot, they need something that they can achieve in a more efficient way than guys that are centralized or focused more on doing PvP primary stuff, and vice versa. That eliminates the ganking problem. Well, for the most part, it eliminates the PvE player feeling like they're being left behind and being missold something. It eliminates the PvPer's desire to find good PvP-related stuff, because they'll fight other PvP-oriented people. That would be your target audience. And then you also have this exchange where the PvP player is able to obtain stuff that they are most suited for, and then the PvE-centric player has stuff that they are most suited for, and they can exchange those things for value. In a perfect world, this could actually work out. But right now, Dune Awakening is lacking on both sides of those, because, quite frankly, aside from getting a ton of plastanium and going and getting some spice in your spice Roomba and flying that out with a transport ornithopter while you have 5 or 10 other guys guarding you in scout ornithopters, so that you can further refine that and turn that into more backup gear for your Uber clan or guild or whatever, there's really nothing else here. That's kind of the end of Dune. We've done it. That's the end game. There needs to be something more to discover, something more to do, more eventized stuff, more dungeons, whatever. At the end of it all, Dune Awakening is a great game, but it is a live service great game. And in being that is a live service great game, the live service game has to have a live service level hook, especially when the live service game is going to have seasonal updates and battle passes that it plans on selling to maintain the revenue stream and the constant server expense. In that spirit, if it were me, I would be trying to make sure that I had a content update lined up for like a month from now. Otherwise, Dune's largest issue is going to be the size of its dwindling player base.